accounting for 33 years, so hopefully by now I know what I'm doing. So, well, many questions along the way. John's asked me to bring some white oak in plain slice, rift, and quarter. And I have those samples here. Before we look at those, I want to show you where they come from within the tree. So if you have a tree and it's round, they'll take it and cut it like this, and cut it like this. And then to get rift, they'll cut a piece like that, and a piece like that, and a piece like that, to get to there. And then this is where your rift comes from. So if you ever wonder why your rift is so skinny, that's the part of the tree that it comes from. You've got growth rings that go around there. And based on those growth rings, it looks different on the wood. So to get your flat sawn or your plain slice, if this wasn't here, they would just cut it like this. And that's where you get the more arch or cathedrals. Okay? So let's look at the board. So let's start with the plain slice. That would be these here. And you can see you've got more of the arches, cathedrals. The little strip here looks like it might be a little bit of rift, but that's just a part of the plain size look. That's where the tree's round. If we could grow them square, we could make it rich, but they grow round. This is called the sapwood. That's on the very most outer side of every tree. They're always darker, and on the inside of the tree, it's always, or excuse me, the outside's always lighter. The inside's always darker. And from species to species, it'll vary whether it's a big, this is called heart, the dark, whether it's a big heart or a big sap. So like in hard maple, the sap is bigger and the dark's really small. That's where you get all the white maple. But in oak, the heart's really big, and walnut, the heart's really big. That's where you get all the dark. Okay? So you can see that's the flat sawn or the plain slice. And that would have came from this part of the tree. You get some bigger pieces out of that. Can you grab those, please? Set them on top of it there. So this is the rift, and that would have came from here. Typically skinnier pieces, and you've got all the straight grain. And if you look at the end of the board, you can usually see that it's almost 90-degree angles a lot of times. Okay, so I want to talk about the quarter sawn for a second. So in the center of the tree, the Mother Nature sends out these things called Medullary Rays. And they're actually feeding tubes that put a new layer of tree on it, on the outside every year. A new layer, another year, another new layer. The way it gets its energy is from these feeding tubes. And those feeding tubes, if you look at the end of a board like this, can you see those white lines there? That's the medullary ray or the feeding tubes. It's like a straw that goes to the outside and puts a new layer on the outside. So if you cut right through that, that gives you the quarter sawn mode, which is those. So like right here, you can see those rays through there. So if we're just looking through the end, there'd be one of those feeding tubes, a medullary ray going right through it. So that's only, it's the same log. This could have came off the same tree, but based off of the way it gets cut, you get a different look. Kind of cool, right? So there's some advantages to quarter sawn. The pioneers figured out that wood shrinks and moves different ways. And typically in the flat sawn, it will move more in the width-wise. We have kilns now, so it's easier to cut the wood that way. But this way, they didn't have kilns back in the old days, and so this one will shrink in thickness, but not hardly in width. That's why all your antiques are quarter sawn and not flat sawn. Cool? Okay, let's talk about tallies. Do you have questions? I'll lift those off and we'll talk about tallies. Okay, so it's the width times the length divided, width times the length divided by divided by 12, 12 or 144. So I'm going to use 12 because we're going to measurement feet. In our industry, we always measure things by the feet. It's just easier. It's a 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot. So I'm going to take this piece here, and it is, we're going to call it 8 inches because it's heavier than 7.5 by 4 feet. So it is 8 inches times 4 feet.
Pretty good. You can write it upside down like that, Ron.
Give me a minute, I'll mess it up. So we got 8 times 4, and I'm divide it by 12 because I'm using feet as my length. So divide by 12, that's 2.66. Oops.
That's right. Hey, that's right.
2.66.
Oh, that's impressive.
Okay. So if you're to come get this, we would round it up to 3 feet because it's over. If it's less than 5, we round it under. Averages, all averages out. Okay? So let's say these are all the same length. The fastest way to tell these is to go like this. Say that's 35 inches. See, I rounded under because it's under a half. 35 inches, and we're going to pretend that they're all 4 feet. So we have 35 inches by, oops, I did it, 4 feet. So we've got 35 times 4 divided by 12. That's 11.66. So that'd be 12. 12. That look right?
You're backwards there.
I'm backwards there.
Yep. We'll forgive you this
12.
once.
Okay. So now we've got this thickness here. I didn't times it by anything because it's 1 inch. Because if you take a number and times it by 1, it's itself, right? So if it's 1.5 inches, you times it by 1.5. So if this was 6/4, how thick's that? 1.5 inches?
Yep.
Okay, so then you would take this 2.66 and times it by 1.5. So we take 2.66 times 1.5. So that's 4 feet, 3.99. So if this was 6/4 material, that would then be 4 board feet.
And you round it at the very end there after you do the thickness
Yep,
count.
yep. So I'm going to ask you to do it by, let's take this, 35 inches by 4 feet, but I want you to do it in 8/4.
Alright,
So tell me the math.
so we got 35 inches wide.
Yep,
We're going to multiply that by 4 foot long.
yep.
I don't know if I did that times. I did do the times. Times 4 foot long. And that gives 140.
Divided by,
We're going to divide that by 12
yep,
feet.
Yep. Equals.
Is 11.6 a lot.
Mhm.
And then we're going
8/4
to
thick. So you
multiply
times it
that
by,
by 8/4 is 2 inches
inches.
thick.
that's right,
That's
23
23 and a
feet.
bit, and then we round that down to 23.
23 feet.
Yep.
Perfect. So, let's talk about if the length were like this. If it were me, I would just measure it right here. So let's say this chunk is going to fall into there, we'll just call it good. If I was measuring each board individually, I'm going to slip through here for a second. A little space in these. Sometimes in units, there is a little space.
A little warp or you get a void.
You have a void. So the easiest way is not to go like this. If you just got a few pieces, like 5 or 10 rows, that says 39 inches. But what I do is I say, okay, so that goes there, and hold my finger, and go there, over there, and that 39 now turns into 34 inches, right? So then I'll go to the next row and start measuring boards. I'm taking out the gaps. The other way around that is you measure 3 average rows, take out your gaps, and then if you're doing a big unit, it takes a lot of time to go through all those. I'll take 3 average rows and then figure out what they are by doing that, and that'll get it for you. So then I would take the 34 times the length. If I have a bunch of 7s and my 8s, I'll actually tally them separately. Or I'll tally them all as 8s and then take 1 foot off of a certain amount so that you get what you paid for. Now, do we make errors? We do. The NHLA, National Hardwood Lumber Association, says there's a tolerance of 3%. So we can be plus or minus 3%. So we've taken units before, we had 10 guys in the mill, all 10 of them get different, but we try to be within 3% of each other. All right? Questions?
I just know that sometimes we get some of our 10-foot bundles and we got that whole end hollowed out. So would you just like measure the dimensions of that hollow and then subtract 1 foot for each of those boards, or?
I would probably, if it was more hollow than not, I'd measure it, let's say it was 9-footers.
Take it all as 9 foot and then add on the 10 foot?
Add on a foot by the your pieces there.
Okay.
Yeah. Or if you just look like it's half 9s and half 10s, you can still do it, but it's probably pretty close by going 9.5.
Right. Okay.
Does that help?
Yep.
Question?
No, makes sense so far.
So, that? Okay. No questions? Mr. P?
All good here.
Okay. It's this is my favorite chunk of wood that I've acquired because it shows all 3 cuts in one piece. That's how close it comes. So on this quarter saw, you can see we got quarter showing right there, but not over here. That's because the tree's round and those growth rings are changing. And on the rift, we don't have any quarter. We try to buy it separately, and every now and then we'll get some quarter. I don't see any quarter in that. Yeah, that's just a straight piece. But yeah, as you can see, you got rift there, and then quarter. So this would be the flat sawn, those 2 edges. Right here's rift, and right here's quarter sawn, all within 2 inches. And because of those growth rings and where those feeding tubes come out. That feeding tube's going that way and we've cut through it, so it shows up there. On the end, it gets beautiful plain sliced, and then on the other side, because it's continued on a different radius for the face, it's all straight grain, rift. That's crazy, isn't it? Sometimes we'll have a board that's quarter sawn on one side, turn it over, it's rift. That's why a lot of times they'll say, I want something rift and quartered, but it's tough to get just rift, it's tough to get just quartered. But we do our best to separate that out. Cool? All right.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ron.